John, let's start out with what happened that night almost 1 year ago to Brianne.
Well, it was a Thursday night, and she started a new job that night, and I popped by the restaurant lounge that she worked in, and in Halifax, just downtown Halifax, and I popped in to make an appearance, and it was as I often did, Ron. I just dropped by, say hello. She breezed by, busy, 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 waved at me, said, "I can't talk right now, I'm too busy," and this is pretty typical, and I just said, just hi, and then I left. And then later on that night, she called me to say that she'd had a great shift. She had more sales than anybody else in that organization had that night for the first night. So she's very upbeat, very positive, and very excited. And I said, "So what's on the agenda for tonight?" And she said, "Well, I'm going out to a friend's to celebrate our birthday. It's coming up, which is on the 21st, a few days later." And I said, "Great. So are you going to be drinking too much tonight?" She said, "Oh, no." She said, "We're just going to, just the two of us, we're going to have a little celebration of our birthdays because they're both the same on the same birthday." So the next morning, as my normal routine, I gave her a call, sent her a text message, and after I wasn't able to raise her in the late morning, I was concerned. So I jumped in my car and I drove down to her apartment in Halifax. And when I walked in the building, lo and behold, there was a police officer standing at the door, and I had no idea what was going on at that point. She didn't tell me. I think I caught her unawares, and I think she was inexperienced herself in this matter, because as I was pressing her to let me into the apartment, she was saying, "No, you can't get in." And I said, "Well, I have the key here. I have a key. Brianne allowed me to have a key. She knows, she's okay with that." And she said, "No, you can't come in." And I said, "Well, I need to get in." She said, "She's not there." And I said, "Well, where is she?" And she said, "She's at the morgue." So at that point, I started weeping uncontrollably, and I wept uncontrollably every day for well over 7 months, 6, 7 months, and still regularly cry. Well, almost every day, I'm thinking. People say to me, "I can't imagine." Well, I tell them they can't imagine. And you can't imagine losing a child. Brianne was my stepdaughter, but she was my daughter. She'd been in my life since she was 5 years old. She's my baby. And you can't imagine the pain. Nor should we try to imagine the pain. It's just too excruciating to imagine. So that's what happened. And then the following 6 months, we waited and waited until the coroner's report finally came in. I guess this is quite routine. At that point, we discovered that she had died from alcohol and prescription drugs. And she had Dilaudid that night, and we'd never known her to use Dilaudid. Her friends say she never did, to their knowledge. She told me an awful lot about her experiences, things that she might not even have told her mother. And we just had that kind of a relationship. And the coroner says, yes, because the Dilaudid was in her system, but she didn't have a prescription for it. So trafficking was involved. Someone had to have given it to her. I doubt that they would have sold it to her, but maybe they were just trying to get her hooked. Who knows? Because that's the nature of the beast.
Did you ever find out what exactly happened?
Well, she had the get together at her friend's place in her apartment, and that's evidently where she got the drugs. So, but we don't know who gave them. I sat down, and Donna's mother and I sat down with the police officer after we got all this information. We sat down with him, and they were very sympathetic and gave us an ear, so to speak. And I presented him with a list that I typed up of 12 or so questions that I think needed to be answered. Where did she get the drugs? Who gave them to her? Why did she end up crashing not in her girlfriend's apartment, but in a neighboring apartment with a total stranger? Just fell asleep on the couch. That doesn't make, the pattern was things that just didn't make sense to us, and we wanted answers on this. And they weren't able to get us any answers whatsoever. In fact, at one point, the officer said, when I was following up on a phone call, he said, "Well, I can't even find this young lady that you want me to interview." And I said, "Well, I went online and I found it within a minute." And I said, "Here's where she works. Here's the phone number. Here's the address." And he wasn't able to. She wouldn't even talk to him. So they're impotent. Do they try enough? I don't know. I'm not really here to criticize the police department. I know they have a very, very tough job.
What changed in you?
The trauma of losing a child is beyond belief. The pain of it is with you every day, and you are a different person from then on. My initially I was just in the grieving mode, but the more I thought of it, the more I realized if I could save a life by going public with this, if I can talk to other young people or about their parents or whoever, I can save just one life, then be well worth the extra pain involved in doing that. So it took me a year and a half to get to that point, because a few months ago, Ron, I'd be a blubbering fool right now. I wouldn't be able to do this. But now I can talk about it. So when I got to that point, I said, okay, let me step forward, let me make it known that this is a very dangerous situation. The United States Senate calls it an epidemic, the misuse of prescription drugs, especially Dilaudid, which they call drugstore heroin. Drugstore heroin, scary term. But, you know, as I was saying earlier, if someone offered you heroin, you'd probably say, no, I don't want that. But they offer you Dilaudid, it's just some painkiller that's dispensed all the time for people with serious problems. No one will tell you, and they're giving it to you for recreational use, that you might not wake up the next morning. Well, the incidence of sudden death on this, or death from just going to sleep, what happens is it depresses the automatic system in your body that makes you breathe. It depresses it. It's my understanding of it. So that when you go to sleep, you don't wake up.
John, because of Brianne's death and the deaths of so many other promising young people, what do you want done?
I want to see the province, the Department of Health and Wellness, conduct a study similar to what they did in the Annapolis Valley through Dr. Richard Gould a couple of years ago. They discovered that from 2007 through 2010 that there were at least 13 deaths in the Annapolis Valley related to this type of excessive use of prescription drugs. Now, the Annapolis Valley area is about a quarter of the size. Does that mean we have 4 times as many children, as potentially 50 children in a 4-year period have died in the metro area? Well, the fact is we don't know, but we should know. I'm concerned about it. People in the media should be concerned about it. If it is an epidemic and it's a hidden epidemic, we should know about it. Parents need to know about it. Parents would be enraged if we had an epidemic going that were killing our children and they weren't told about it. Well, guess what? We're not being told about it. It's being hushed up. It's being poo-pooed by the Department of Health, by the education system, saying, no, we don't need to tell children about this because it's not that serious. Well, guess what? I was talking to a university student, a friend of Brianne's, just on Saturday, and she said, no one's ever talked about this in high school. She went through high school, she graduated in the same high school that Brianne did, and she said no one ever talked about this in high school. Never talked about the danger of this particular drug and how it works. Because now I can see parents whose children come home from a party, they may have had a little bit too much to drink. Rather than doing the normal thing and say, go to bed and sleep it off, they might say, stay up, have a coffee. Don't go to sleep because you may never wake up. That's what they need to hear, not the usual treatment. This is something that people need to be aware of. Lives can be saved, and I think that we need to do something to help people from dying unnecessarily.
What would Brianne want?
This is exactly what I asked myself. Her mother wasn't so sure this was a good idea, but then I said, if Brianne were here, I know she would want it. I know she would. When she was in high school, they had high school a bomb scare. They were going to cancel the prom. She had me drive her up to Charles P. Allen, and as a result of that, she walked in, and I said, you're going to be respectful? She said, oh yes. She walked in and talked to the principal and persuaded, or gave her argument they should continue with the prom dance, and they did. And hopefully she had an impact, but they did have the dance as a result of it, and she had a beautiful picture in her prom dress, which I have right now, and so I know that she would say, well done, Dad, you do it, because you could save a life.